Today I had a few interesting things. Just now I did a calculation, and I'm making about 12 an hour, 3 days, $216. If I was making 15 an hour, just those $3 extra every hour, it would come out to $270, and at the end of the month it would be over $1,000, which would be enough to pay for the rent on this place. Unfortunately, with 216, that leaves me in the upper $800. That's $200 short, almost. So actually, it's only about $100. No, yeah, it's about $100 short, give or take. So, if I was making 15 an hour, I could definitely afford, but I'm only making 12 an hour. Today, I thought of this because today, while I was at the place, someone came in for an interview, and the manager said, like, what would you think you'd like to be your base pay for your situation? And I'm trying to remember what I said during my interview, but I can't quite recall at the moment. I think I may have said like 15, but then the person said like 12 starting or something like that. But I wonder if they'll ever. I'll have to think about that. If will be an opportunity to ever ask for the 15 an hour. But anyway, today was the first day I used that drive to work program thing. Thankfully, I only have to use it once a week because they don't work on weekends. So that was a boon because there is a winter storm coming and it was incredibly cold, and their range for arrival is about an hour long. So I stood out in the freezing cold for over an hour. Freezing cold for over an hour. It was, by the time they got there, thankfully it was a very warm bus, and I was shivering very much when I got to the place. I had to, like, give myself a second to, because, I have to handle merchandise and things like that, and the products, and I was shaking so much that it had more of a risk to carrying around, the stuff, so I had to give myself a second. But, yeah. Uh, One thing that surprised me was that, not the first time I got on the bus, but the return trip, because they do a pickup and a return trip. On the return trip, the driver wanted to confirm the route with me, so I looked at the pad that there is that has because there's a GPS map, and I looked at the pad, and on it there's a passenger notes section for the bus driver, the driver, to see details about the destination and about the person. Well, I learned about the person because when I looked at it, it had a detail that pertained to, like, specifically locating where my residence is. But then right next to it, in the passenger notes section, right next to that detail, was the words, "has high functioning autism." And that completely threw me off. I was like, what? What do you... When? And then I even asked the driver, like, I asked him questions about that note. And he was just like, oh, I don't know. And I was just like, okay. Well, that's all right. And then I sat down, seat belted, came all the way back home, and I called the place. I called I called the place that runs the program, and I asked them about, like, is it possible to... Well, first, I didn't jump into it immediately. I was like, is it possible to change... There's inaccurate information on the driver's notes. And then the person checked for me, And then they were like, okay, what's the inaccurate information? And I was like, it says that I have high functioning autism, which isn't true. It's never been to a doctor. It's never been diagnosed. There's no officialness to that note or statement. I never said it myself or even indicated. I think it was, and then I said, like, I think it was the other person when they talked to the one who runs the program. They must have told the person that. They must have said something like that. Because I never said that. I see no reason why for the program director to assume such a thing. There's nothing I provided. The only place that could have come from was just like hearsay from the other person telling the person when they because remember, this person is like doing things behind my back, trying to put me on food stamps, trying to offload me in any way that they can. So when they were doing the trying to sign me up without me knowing, when they were doing that, they must have also said that behind my back to the person. So the lady was very understanding and removed that from my passenger note, which I was very grateful for. I said thank you, appreciate it, and then that was it. Hung up. But yeah. I wasn't surprised. I was surprised that it was there, but I wasn't surprised at the same time due to the other person being involved. Like, yeah, that is something that person would say completely. The person, I've mentioned it before in my other journals. The person said it all the time. Like, constantly tried to gaslight or insinuate that was the case. Although usually worse, I would say. They would bring up all kinds of things like I had some form of dementia or Alzheimer's that was like early or something like that. Like constantly insinuating and invoking like different conditions in health and disorders all the time like that. Mainly because the person believed that anyone who didn't respond positively to them or their behavior, or set boundaries with them, or had to address something with them must be mentally ill, or have some kind of illness, or instability, or disorder, or condition, or, whatever. Like that. So, that certainly didn't surprise me in that way. It wasn't completely out of nowhere. Like, yeah, that makes sense. The other person told this drive to work company that. So, just a continuation. The person's still the same. But, yeah, and I'm 100% sure the person's lying about a lot of things on purpose or trying to go behind my back on a lot of things, and basically just trying to further just get rid of my presence altogether. I can tell the person feels very freed. I don't mean to say that the person has it, but imagine the closest thing I can think of is I don't know if this is the right word, postpartum depression. That thing where a parent hates their child and feels relief when they can get rid of them at any time or be it's very much like that. You can tell there's a certain, my life would be better, and I just, I'm excited to just move on without you, completely. That kind of thing. It's that kind of thing. That is best how I would describe it, right now. I'm sure there's a better way to say it, but that's where I'll leave that for right now. Just more Wayfair furniture, more pictures, just like things that don't line up. Things never lined up from the start, but now it's like getting more clear how things aren't lining up. But yeah, so that was that part of the day. Today was an interesting day. It was very, I would say, like my experience and what I've learned is really starting to pay off. There was one moment where maybe I got not ahead of myself, but maybe I figured it out a little too much. You know, I've gotten a feel of the flow of the day and when certain hours are. So I set up something ahead of time, knowing fully well what was going to happen later, and it did exactly. Everything went to my expectations, as it always had. But one of the upper guys, he came and he was just like, yeah, don't come and ask, don't do that. Just make sure I wouldn't do that if. And I was just like, okay. And then it worked out exactly as I had hoped it would work out. But like, okay, I get it. I understand, Just in case. I think the person's made it very clear that this isn't the way that hours in business usually work. Things are very slow, and he's very much still expecting and keeping with that. So I'm expecting at least that what he said will have what's the word? A lot more like apparentness, a lot more immediate bearing. It'll make a lot more sense when business returns to how he's made it clear that he's used to it functioning. It could just be the season. It could be different things like that. Yeah, I admit I'm inexperienced with that. I don't know. What I've experienced is like what I've experienced. Is just what I've experienced. I've settled into this kind of flow of the work, but apparently, it's not necessarily how it is all the time or usually is. So we'll have to see how that turns out. But yeah, you can learn from that. I think it's understandable. But yeah, but besides that, it was a very, just in the flow. Doing really good. Less people complaining, and it wasn't a new. Here's the thing. It was a good day, but an odd day. There was a lot more just like people coming in and complaining about certain aspects of service than I've seen before. Like I most days I never see any complaints, and then today there were like 2 or 3, and that was like really odd. I've never. And like almost like back to back to back. It must have been just like a bad batch or a bad run, and then things kind of balanced out. Yeah. But all that made me think about something. It made me think just all this interaction in general. It made me think about different ideas, different concepts, and the main one is people who look down on other humans, people who look down on other people. That's always bothered me. It's always bothered me when people not even like, not talking about calling out specific examples of someone who is rude, nasty, mean, that kind of thing. And I'm not advocating that, well, if you just understood them, then it would make it all right. Well, no, it wouldn't. But, I'm talking about in general. Well, taking their experience or their mindset or and then projecting it onto other people, or turning that into the entirety of the experience. And I saw a comment the other day. I wrote it down and I wanted to read it. As a weird person who fully understands what normal is, 99% of human interactions bore me. And I wrote down, I've seen lots of other comments in the same vein, but they always make me laugh in a sort of embarrassed way. The genre of comment of, I'm not like other people because I understand people too well. Yeah. Or can see through the facade, or, self-mythologizing, melodramatic, sort of fake humility. Fake humility about being an outsider while also claiming to have insider expertise. Excuse me. Someone trying to sound profound, unique, or having more clarity. A general tone of self-importance. Yeah. And I wrote down, it's the looking down on other people aspect of it, looking down on humans. The quiet implication that most people are simple, predictable, or beneath the speaker's level of insight. It's a kind of self-elevation that treats everyone else like background characters in their personal narrative. What's interesting is that this posture usually says more about the person making the comment than about humanity. People who talk that way often seem to be trying to protect themselves from feeling ordinary, or from admitting that they struggle to connect, so they flip the script. Instead of I have trouble relating, or forming connections, or finding connections, it becomes everyone else is boring. It's a shield disguised as superiority. Framing entire people, groups, or a species as dull or predictable. A whiff of condescension. Yeah. Oh, and I wrote down this specific example. It feels like those instances of people claiming that people are inauthentic and wearing masks. I think, personally, other people are fascinating. I saw this YouTube video where Marlon Brando was on the Dick Cavett show, and he was going through a whole spiel about how everyone is an actor putting on a performance. And he's looking at Dick Cavett and talking to him like, I see through your mask, this inauthentic facade. And Dick Cavett is just sort of looking at him, trying to figure out how to move the conversation forward. People in the comments, partially because of his stardom, treating Brando like he's some kind of sage or has spoken wise words, when to me it seems that he is just disconnected from other humans and lacks a certain sense of empathy. And can't understand other people. And, yeah. It sounds deep at first glance, but when you look closer, it reflects the speaker's own distance from other people more than any universal truth about human nature. And this whole everyone is wearing masks, putting on an act talk. Yeah, Brando is a perfect example. He had this mystique, this aura of tortured genius, so when he said something vaguely philosophical, people treat it like scripture. But stripping away the celebrity glow, what he's saying isn't actually profound. It's more like a person who feels alienated, projecting that alienation onto everyone else. Yeah. And I wrote, Dick Cavett's reaction wasn't anything of exposure or feeling threatened. He's not dazzled, he's not having an epiphany or his mind opened. He's politely just trying to keep the conversation from sinking into a swamp of self-seriousness and self-absorption. How do I steer this conversation back to something more productive? The everyone is fake worldview is itself a kind of mask. It lets someone avoid vulnerability by assuming everyone else is already performing. If you believe no one is authentic, then you never have to risk being authentic yourself. That's part of it, but another thing, yeah. Hold on, there. I wrote something else down. It was a quote from Columbo that I think about all the time. Yeah, the idea that you can see through everyone else's supposed masks or acts is a subtle way of placing yourself above them. A kind of superiority. Performance of insight versus genuine insight. And then I wrote down, it might sound silly, but it reminds me of Waluigi. He believes that everyone else is also cheating, he believes everyone else is cheating, so he feels justified for him cheating, because then to him that would make it even and fair, so he's not really cheating. So in his mind, he's not really cheating. But in performance, it's that thing of like, if everyone is acting, then no one is acting. Can you even define what that means anymore at that point? When isn't someone acting then? Can you define that? What's the difference between the raw material of thoughts that nobody acts on? Well, some people do, but it's very dangerous. But it's, you process the information and you sift it through your personality and things like that until it becomes the finalized result, which is the action, or the inaction, which is in itself a kind of action. But, yeah. If I assume everyone else is doing it, then my behavior is justified. Yeah. Self-protection disguised as insight. In his world, everyone must be acting, or an alternative with Waluigi cheating, because the alternative would force him to confront something uncomfortable. That he's the odd one out and responsible for his own choices and worldview, so he invents a narrative where he's the only one who sees the truth, and therefore the only one acting fairly. Self-protection disguised as insight. Same thing what's happening and everyone is fake, or 99% of people bore me. Same emotional logic, dressed up in pseudo-philosophy. Projection as a worldview, superiority as a shield. People who insist everyone is wearing masks often feel disconnected themselves, so they project that feeling outward. I see through everyone's facade stance frames the speaker as uniquely perceptive, which conveniently avoids vulnerability. Everyone is an authentic mindset, cuts off the possibility of genuine connection before it can even start. Yeah. Trying to sound profound, but end up sounding like someone who hasn't quite figured people out. I'm too deep for normal people comments. Revealing insecurity. Thinking they're exposing grand conspiracy. Here's the quote. A quote from Columbo I thought of. And I think of a lot. It's probably not exact. I probably should have watched it before I wrote it down. But it's the quote in one of the early Columbo movies where he's talking to the lady at the airport. And he says, "You have no conscience, limits your imagination. You can't imagine anyone else being any different than the way that you are." I'm going to repeat that for myself. You have no conscience, limits your imagination. You can't imagine anyone else being any different than the way that you are. Yeah. People who insist that everyone is fake, everyone is boring, or everyone is wearing masks often do exactly what Columbo is pointing out. They can't imagine their inner lives different. They can't imagine inner lives different from their own. If they feel disconnected, they assume everyone else is disconnected. If they feel inauthentic, they assume everyone else is performing. If they feel superior, they assume everyone else is simple. But it's not insightful, it's just projection. Columbo's tying it to imagination. When someone lacks empathy, their imagination collapses inward. They can't picture or imagine the complexity of other people's motives, fears, joys, contradictions, or lives. So they flatten everyone into a single predictable shape, the same emotional logic behind Waluigi. Not revealing a deep truth about humanity, just revealing a limitation in how that person sees humanity. When it probably is more socially intelligent to recognize that people are far more varied and interesting than some people are willing to admit. Describing the speaker's blind spot. Yeah. Once someone adopts one of those worldviews, it becomes self-reinforcing. Every interaction then gets interpreted through that lens of I'm the only one who sees the truth, which conveniently keeps them from having to examine their own behavior or loneliness. And I remember now what made me think of it more clearly. It was a guy who was there, and I was cleaning up, and the man made the joke of, you missed a spot. And that fascinated me. It really did. It made me stop and think. Because it's like, it's that... It made me think about... Not like the man as a person, but just thinking about making that joke. It tells me... I guess so, in a way, as a person. It tells me a bit about, like, the person's sense of humor, probably knowing that it's a repeated line that gets said a lot, knowing it's not like the funniest thing in the world, but knowing that the person is comfortable enough to, almost reach out and connect in that way, but like not having to feel the need to have to necessarily be original, but that's all right. It doesn't need to be, but just trying that moment of connection, even if it's helpful, not helpful, helpful, not helpful, or, original, not original, insightful, not insightful. I think it's just kind of interesting, like, it says a bit about the person, a bit about their humor, their comfortableness, their recognition of what someone is doing, how they speak to someone, more of a jab or a playful one-liner. I think there's a lot to think about with other people sometimes. Not looking for approval or anything, but just asking why for a second, or, not approval or trying to say that it's okay or justifying, but figuring out, like, coming up with a story. I don't know that man really any more than I did before, but there's a story in my mind now behind something that simple. I wouldn't say I do this for everyone, but I was just by myself at the time doing some tidying, and the guy said that, so I kind of got, I was thinking to myself, being a little contemplative, because there's not much else there's no one to talk to, so I'm just inward thinking about stuff, and then he said that, and I was just like, oh, it's that common line. And so, like, I mulled over it, and then I had that thought, basically, afterwards. Had I been busy or more people around or someone to talk to, I probably would have just, like the rest of the day, just there were more quirky, unique or distinct interactions than that, and they're just out of my mind, But that one in particular, I just, just the right moment for me to hold on to it and think about it more. I think some good news, something I'm grateful for. My one very good friend helped me to find a group to attempt to to attempt to interact with, hang out with, engage with. I got some good advice from, just like, not from a person, but I got some good advice from just researching, like, yeah, like, don't go into it with the goal of you're going to become friends with people or anything like that. Here, oh, wow. Why is it so zoomed up? Let's see. What kind of... Yeah, you don't have to join with the intention of finding friends. You don't have to join thinking I need to find my group here. Instead, join with the mindset of I'm going to sit in the corner and observe for a while and interact wherever I start to feel more comfortable, where I start to understand, and see what happens from there. And don't have to feel guilty if it doesn't work out, but at least I tried. At least I tried. And so I'm trying. I really am. I'm trying for connection. I'm going to give it a go. There's a particular journal I made, and somehow, I don't know how it has 28 people who have seen it. I don't know if it resonated or something like that, or people just see it more. I don't know what happened there, but I set a goal in that one, and it's taken a while, but I've decided I'm gonna try and follow through. I'm gonna go for it. But, yeah. Odd day. Weird negatives. Good positives. This journal's later today because I got home and immediately went for, like, restorative nap. So I slept for a while. I feel good. I feel healthy. Despite the anxieties about money, jobs, payment, unaccepted applications, despite all that, a person kind of trying to leave me in the lurch, which I'm fine with being left, but not in the super pressured, mess up everything so that I can get out of here and leave as quickly as possible kind of thing. Like, no, I still need to get me a sec. I've made it clear there's a plan here, and like I've alleviated you of as much as possible, given you bare minimum, and I know that this is within your means. I don't appreciate you lying, going behind my back, trying to force things, and making implications to people. It's whatever, but like, I'm not mooching off of you or freeloading off of you. I've alleviated you as much as I possibly can. You're purposely choosing not to communicate, and that's your choice, but I'm gonna do what I gotta do. And if I can do that the right way, and have it land the right way, and ensure that things are structural and functional in the long run, then I'm going to go for that, and do that. But, I'm gonna end the journal here. A nice short one. That way I don't go too late. Because, there's some other things that I would like to do. I like to do at least one journal a day, so I don't want to switch to the next day not having done one. Oh yeah, I should mention, this is, I put a sticky note down. I think on another day, I found another one of my lists for music, so on another day, I'll do more recommendations with that. Trying to think of places to submit things. Writing, artwork, that kind of thing. I don't know any good places yet. If anyone has suggestions, opportunity. I'd always appreciate opportunity. Anyway, this is official. Okay, I better update it. This is my 28th journal now. Not counting ones that had to be split into 2 parts, which were one journal, but, due to the limitations of the software, ended up getting split. Not counting the little music uploads that I do. This is now 28 so far. Only 2 until 30. I don't think that really has any real significance, but, 30 like a month, 30 days of doing. I feel like it's got to count for something. So I'll stop right here.